But I'd just like to take a little poll here briefly. I mean, I don't want you to say, boy, this Hugh Sprunt's a genius and he's got this all nailed down. If the guy was murdered, I don't know who murdered him. If he was murdered, I don't know why he was murdered. If he was murdered, I don't know where he was murdered. All I'm trying to say is these dudes in these reports that say, oh yeah, it's totally obvious he died of his own hand in that park with that gun and there's no evidence to the contrary, they are not telling you the truth. Or at least they are misstating themselves. Question?
Yeah, I had a question. I thought I heard you say that Dr. Howe reported that he had not seen any blood on the head or shirt or body, I guess, but that one of the paramedics, I don't know if it was Arthur or whoever, had seen it running down the neck and down the shirt. What was the discrepancy there?
Here's what's going on there. There is a progression over the course of the evening to do with the blood. The first person to find the body, remember I said, he saw a little dried blood here and a little dried blood on the lips, and that was it. As the evening wore on, more and more blood appeared. Trails of blood, liquid blood, coagulating blood. The relatively early people on the scene saw relatively little blood. The people that were on the scene relatively later saw relatively more. The only thing I could possibly make from that is that as they rearranged the death scene, the body bled a little more. Plus, if the body, say he did shoot himself here, there's you're going to get more drainage. So say he had shot himself at pick a time. They very roughly estimated the time of death at like 3:30. It was really something like 3:30 or 4 plus or minus an hour maybe. And so some of it is probably just natural drainage, but basically you get more and more as the evening goes on.
So when do you think Dr. Howe actually was there then? That's what I was confused about.
There's a whole thing with Dr. Howe. He said to the FBI, I got to the park at 6:40. Fisk says, oh no, Dr. Howe was wrong. He got to the park at 7:45. Dr. Hough's ME's report, the one that I showed you, it's got times in there where we could put it up again, it's buried, but basically it says he got to the park, he was called apparently at 6:45. He didn't get to the park at 6:45. He got there about 7. He saw the body at 7:15. His report is consistent with him arriving at the park about 45 minutes before Fisk says he did. Starr goes in and tries to address this and just screws it all up royally. It's not very grabbable, grabby graphically, so I didn't show it to you. But basically he goes in and misstates what people say in the handwritten notes, and you don't know that unless you go to the handwritten notes and read them. And so in terms of what he saw, the point of the thing where it said something like Dr. Howe saw the exit wound, what I wanted to point in the back of the head, Fisk said he saw that. If you go to his own ME's report, there's no mention of an exit wound in the back of the head. There's another point, Fisk says Dr. Howe observed a large pool of blood on the ground behind Foster's head. The reason that Fisk says that is because the more blood at the site, the more likely he died there. Howe actually told the FBI, when you go to his FBI interview, he said that the blood, Fisk said large pool on the ground behind the head. What Howe actually told the Bureau was the volume of blood was small, not large. What blood there was matted and clotted, not a pool, and it wasn't on the ground. It was matted and clotted on the back of his head.
I'm sorry. I was just going for the discrepancy between the paramedic seeing it going down his shirt versus Howe not seeing it.
The paramedic, yeah, I don't have a real good answer to that because let's see, the paramedic in question was at that time he made that description, that was before Howe got there, so there is a discrepancy there. Now, of course, one problem with this method I'm using, I mean, it should be obvious to you, is once you start admitting the FBI is wholesale changing all their reports, it's kind of hard to know what pivot foot to use. So that is a little bit of discrepancy. Okay. Yes, sir.
Please, did you think of using clairvoyant people to establish when Foster was killed and by who and how, etc.?
Could you? What was the very first part of that sentence?
Did you think of using the clairvoyant people?
I don't believe in that stuff. I've read the work of Dr. Ryan, and I think it's anecdotal, but that's my opinion. I have enough trouble figuring out government paperwork without dealing with clairvoyance. If somebody wants to try and could give me a real good R-squared, I'll certainly look at it, but I have trouble with that. Well, hello.
Hello.
This is Mr. Favish here of Silver Gun fame.
I'd like to ask you about two topics. One, the physical properties of a gun going off as the government says it did, and also about Dr. Haut's report in the apparently altered section. As to the gun, if the official version is correct and a piece of skull 1 inch by 1 1/4 inches was blown out the back of his head, doesn't that tell you that some sort of force had to come through his head to do that, meaning hot gases traveling at, what, near supersonic speeds and a bullet? And if that's true, how is it physically possible to leave no blood and brain matter behind the head, on the cannon or on vegetation?
Yeah, you'd expect to see that spatter and splatter, and people said it wasn't there. Perhaps more important than that, think about it, folks. You take a .38 special with high-velocity ammunition, you shove the barrel way back to the back of your throat, you pull the trigger, the gun goes off. A hell of a lot of gas comes out of that barrel. What it does is it blows the hell out of your teeth, your cheeks, everything else. There's a huge recoil with a revolver, more than with an automatic, all other things being equal, because you don't have the slide to take the recoil up. The .38 special has a high front sight. That thing would have come out of his mouth and just destroyed his upper front teeth. There is no evidence in the record that happened. So it just doesn't sound too good on the gun that way.
What do the pathologists who work for Starr and Fisk say about that, and are their reports public?
Well, you can correct me, but basically they don't pay any attention to it.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
No, they don't. They don't. They basically looked at Dr. Byers' paperwork, the autopsy doctor, and said, looks good to me.
Okay, and my second topic was that document, Haut's report, that appears to be altered on the front page. The original has to be somewhere.
Yeah, the original is presumably at Northern Virginia Medical Examiner's office. I have not seen the original.
And can't you remove that white corrective tape material or white out, whatever was used?
If you got the original, you could, presumably.
And there's
no... Starr just ignores the whole thing like it doesn't exist. In fact, he misquotes Haut, as you saw tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You know.
Personally, I would have welcomed even more sarcasm. I enjoyed it.
Well, I try and be rational and unemotional and analytical.
If you want to be defensive, you could call it heavy irony.
That's right.
Heavy
irony.
That's right. One thing puzzles me about the Dr. Haut thing, mouth to neck. He may have mistaken the entry wound for an exit wound. And the other thing is, shooting yourself mouth to neck wouldn't be fatal, would it?
Well, see, that's the problem, is that no one who wants to kill themselves would shoot themselves like in the mouth, out the neck, because chances are you just quad yourself.
Well, it was in the back of the neck.
Well, there's a theory that says that that this was the wound back here in the neck. I don't really know. The main thing is that we've got this. If you want to know what my guess is, he was shot with a low-velocity weapon, a 22 or a 25. It entered here under the jawline. It messed up the tongue. It went up in the head, and it stayed in the head. The reason it stayed in the head is because a 22 or a 25, even if you don't take some of the powder out, which is what hit guys do, that's the toughest part of your skull. Dr. Haut specifically told the park police guys at the autopsy, he said, X-rays reveal there are no bullet fragments in the head. I take that to mean there sure as hell was a bullet in the head, and it sure as hell didn't match the .38, so they were trying to let the park police know that it wasn't a bullet in the head. To me, that means there was. The X-rays revealed it. The trouble was that they had to then say, we didn't take any X-rays. That's the way that worked out, is even though the park police report says Dr. Haut told us that X-rays revealed no bullet fragments in the brain, Haut said, well, I don't know why they say that, because I didn't take any X-rays.
Well,
X-rays. Excuse me, Byer,
okay.
The autopsy doctor. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, I listened to your 2 hours, and I didn't hear 20 hours, but of the 2 hours, there was only one thing that I was unfamiliar with, and I'm just one of those casual observers, and that was the fellow named Burton.
Right.
Is that one of the NGBs that the same Burton that was in on the meeting with Hillary and Neuwirth and...
Correct, yes, that's, it's not Dan Burton, it's Bob Burton. He was Deputy White House Chief of Staff at the time. He's the one in the interview where he said, better if disked by someone other than
That's
Burton.
right, that's right. So he was one of those, I call them NGBs, that's no good bastards.
Okay, well, see, the point is, what I would take from that is he was about as inside as you can get. Hence, he's calling Gavin the night of the death, the park police, saying, what's the registration on the gun? What's the gun look like? He knew what was going on, I think. Anyone who would like to buy a diskette back there, I'll put in a brief ad for myself. Feel free. I've assured my wife that any unbought diskettes will be returned to her diskette pile for her use. So it won't be a disaster. Yes, ma'am.